and welcome back. This is day number 9 of our 10-day Improve Your Bachata Challenge. We're almost there. Today's video is regarding some different hip actions that we can use aside from the base hip actions that we covered in the beginning of this series. And today's lesson is the last lesson in which I'm going to be introducing new techniques and information. In tomorrow's class, I am going to teach you a practice routine incorporating all of the concepts that we have worked on in this challenge, with the idea that you will learn it, practice it, film yourself, send me the video so that we can dance side by side on Instagram. It's super important, even if you can't be attending classes in person or going out social dancing right now, that you continue to set goals for yourself in your dancing so that you can continue to enjoy it and continue to improve. And so that is the goal of these challenges, is to give you information every day and then have a goal at the end. And the goal is to share your dancing with me and with all of my followers on Instagram. So I hope that you all will do that. So that's the end of my tangent for today's video. I've been going on a lot of tangents lately, so let's get right into 4 different hip stylings that you can use in your Bachata Basic. Okay, so the first hip action that we are going to add today is our figure 8 hip action going from forward to back. I also want to say, in each one of the hip actions that we're doing in today's video, we are going to apply both to our basic step and to our stationary basic step, so you can learn how to use them in both of those contexts, okay? So the figure 8 action applied to the basic and the stationary basic looks like this. 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap, and stationary, 2, 3, tap, stationary, 3, tap. Okay, so let me explain what I am doing when I'm doing my figure 8. The first thing that you need to know is, in this action, we're going to keep both of our knees gently bent the whole time. So it's different than our Cuban motion, in which I'm alternating the knees. Now I'm keeping both of the knees bent, similar to what I do when I'm doing the pendulum swing in the hips. Now, from here, I want you to see if you can keep your weight centered between your feet and just isolate the hips coming from the core. So because I'm doing an 8, I'm first going to go forward into one hip. And I always tell people, try and flatten that out so that you really are sending your pelvis all the way forward. And then I'm going to lift the hip using the obliques and send it down toward the foot that I'm not standing on. So this has a similar feeling to the pendulum swing, but I'm just going forward first and then swinging up. So let's just practice that. Swing forward, up, and then from here, I'm going to allow my pelvis to rotate. So I wore pants with the zipper today on purpose because I'm going to use it to show you my pelvis is rotating 1/8 of a turn toward the foot that I'm standing on. So my zipper rotated 1/8 off center to the right in this case. Now from here, I'm going to maintain this angle in my hips off center, and I'm going to swing the hips forward again. So you see, I didn't rotate my pelvis. I swung the hips forward, and then when I lift the hip up in my pendulum swing, that's when I come back into center, and then I rotate in the other direction. And I swing hip, push, actually I'll say push the hip forward using your glute, lift using your obliques, and rotate. Push forward, lift, and when I lift, I'm coming back into the center, and I rotate to the other side. Push, lift, rotate. Push, lift, rotate. Really important. Don't change the angle of the pelvis on the pushing. It comes straight across. straight across, push, lift, rotate, push, lift, rotate, push, lift, rotate, push, lift, rotate. Okay? So now, we're going to apply this first to the stationary basic because it's a little more user-friendly. It's a little easier to do it without moving the feet first, and then we will apply it to our basic step. So I'm going to go 1 and 2 and 3 and tap. This part is the same. That the tap, on the tap I'm going to use the hips. We were using the rib cage before, but because this video is about different hip actions, now we're going to come back to the hips. And in tomorrow's routine, we're going to mix it all up so you'll get a good dose of everything, okay? So we're going 1, 2, 3, pulse, and 1, 2, 3, hip, and 1, 2, 3, hip, 1, 2, 3, hip. Okay? Now, applying it to a basic, it's going to feel similar to your pendulum swing, which we've had a lot of practice with in this challenge. Swing, 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 and push, and swing, 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 and push. The only difference is I'm adding this forward action before the swing and the rotating action after the swing. But it still has to happen nice and fluidly, okay? So we're going to go half of an 8, other half of the 8 as I bring my feet together, another half of an 8, and pushing tap. And now I go in the other direction. Forward, up, back, forward, up, back, forward, up, back, and push. 1 and 2 and 3 and push. 1 and 2 and 3 and push. 1, 2, 3, push. 1, 2, 3, push. Okay? So now we're going to try that with music, similar to what we've done in the other videos in this series. We'll first do it half time and then real time. And in this video, we'll do our stationary basic first, half time and real time, and then our normal bachata basic, half time and real time. Okay? So now let's try the figure 8 with music. 5, 6, ready, we go. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2. Going backwards. So I'll show the basic and the stationary basic using that hip action. It looks like this. 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3. Or no, stationary basic, 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap. In this version, as you can see, I'm not using the pushing tap. It doesn't really fit with this movement, so that's why in the beginning I made sure that we different ways to do all of these components so that you can more easily integrate when you're presented with new information. So, starting with our stationary basic, I'm going to make a circle starting with my hip going toward the foot that I'm stepping out onto, which in this case is the right. So I'm going out, tilting my body in this way. So similar to the pendulum, my hips are tilting down toward the foot that I'm walking away from, okay? So I'm not doing this, I'm going here, and my hips and my rib cage, as we know, are always at odds with one another, so my rib cage is going in the other direction. Now I'm going to send my hips back and circle toward the foot that I just walked off of, come forward, and bring the foot in and coming into neutral. So again, I go 1, 2, 3. On 3, I'm kind of crunching the pelvis forward, using my abs to make that happen, and then bringing the foot in. In the stationary version of this step, I do also want you to try to keep your knees straight and create this pelvic, the motion in the pelvis using your abdominals, okay? So we're no longer using the knees to create the hip motion in this one, we're using the abs to bring the hips around. One other thing I'll say is try not to hinge forward when you send your hips back. Naturally, your body will go a little bit forward to counterbalance so that you don't fall back, but I don't want you to overdo that. You want to actually try to lift the rib cage and create kind of an arch in your back as the hips go back, as that has a much nicer, more sensual look to it than hinging over in reaction to what the hips are doing. Okay, so let's try that going to both sides. So I go 1, 2, 3, bring the foot in. And now same thing on the other side, leading with the hip. 1, 2, 3, bring it in. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2, 3, keeping the knees straight. Whoop. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2, 3, tap. Okay, so now looking at how we can incorporate this hip action into our walking basic, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, tap. The exact same action that we just did. Over, around to the back, around to the forward, and tap. But as we move our feet. So this part is the same. Now, as I bring my hips back, I'm bringing the feet together. As I bring my hips forward, I'm stepping out to the side, and then I bring my foot into tap. And other side, I go out. As the hips circle back, I'm bringing this foot in. As the hips circle forward, I'm bringing this foot out to the side, and I tap. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2, 3, tap. Bringing the feet together is the most difficult part of this because when we are stepping with this foot, naturally your body's going to want to reverse the circle because that's just how the body is, but you want to make sure you're continuing to do your hip circle in the same direction for the entire basic. So I'm going around, keep moving, tap. Around, 2, 3, tap. I'm going to show them from the side. I go around, 2, 3, tap. Around, 2, 3, tap. Out, back, forward, tap. Out, back, forward, tap. And now from the back, we go out, back, forward, tap. Out, back, forward, tap. Out, back, forward, tap. Out, back, forward, tap. Talking about the direction of the hips, obviously, not the feet. The feet are continuing to go side together, side tap as we do that, okay? So now again, let's practice the stationary and the walking basic, half time and real time with music. Half time, we go. 1, 2, 3, tap. Okay, so our third hip action that we're going to be practicing today is an up and over, kind of creating like a figure 8 in this direction now instead of this direction. So I'll show you what that looks like. In the basic, it looks like this. 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap, and in the stationary basic, 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap. Okay? So, as you can see just from the beginning, I'm choosing to do the settling tap instead of the pressing tap in this one because there's already a lot going on. But of course, you can use the pressing tap on this one. I just find it's a little bit too much happening, but it is possible. So if you want to practice it that way as a challenge, go right ahead. So what I'm doing first, just to understand the action, you want to stand with your feet about shoulder width apart and feet planted on the ground, and we're going to lift one heel off the ground, and that hip is going to also lift. So it's the heel and the obliques helping me change the angle of the pelvis without moving any other part of the body. So I'm going and put the heel down, but leave the hip where it is. That's the most important part about this action that people often don't do. So they'll lift and then they'll switch right away, and then you don't get the right dynamic in the step. So I'm going lift, put the heel down, but keep the angle of the hip. Now I lift in the other direction, put the heel down, keep the angle of the hip. Lift, drop the heel. Lift everything, drop only the heel. Lift, drop, lift, drop, lift, drop, lift, drop. Okay? So in our stationary basic, I'm going lift, drop, lift, drop, lift, drop, bring the foot in, and then from here, I'm going to actually lift the foot off the ground to lift the hip. So my knee's coming up just a little bit, and drop, lift, drop, lift, drop, tap. I lift the heel, or the foot, the entire foot, and the hip, drop, keeping the angle of the hip here, lift, drop, tap, lift, drop, drop, lift, drop, tap, lift, drop, drop, lift, drop, tap, lift, drop, tap. So coming from the tap into the next lift, I feel is kind of like a circle a circular motion where I'm coming in, up, and out. In, up, and out. So that's the feeling that you want to get in this particular version of the stationary basic. So I'll try it facing away. I go, we'll start with the lifting here. Lift, drop, lift, drop, lift, drop, tap, and drop, drop, drop. Tap, and drop, drop, drop. Tap, and drop, drop. So the tap is more of a transition in this version than it is a position or a step, okay? So now, applying this action to our walking basic, I'm going to go lift, drop, lift, drop, lift, drop, tap. And again, this is going to be a transition as well because it's that same circular motion. So the difference here is on every step, I'm not only lifting the heel now, but I'm also lifting the entire foot off the ground, and. So just practicing that lift. The hip, the foot, and the knee are all coming up, and then I lead with the hip and drop them down, maintaining that angle that I just created. And now I lift and step. This one again is probably going to be the most difficult. Lift, step, because we're bringing the feet together. Lift, step, gather, and circle. Lift, step, gather, and lift, step, gather, lift, step, gather, and step. Okay. I will say that although we are lifting the hips on each step, we are putting more emphasis on the foot that's stepping out to the side than the one that's coming together. So we have a little bit more lift on those steps. That's a way to make this feel a bit more natural. So we go one, small lift, two, tap, one, two, three. So you see this action is a little bit bigger than the one bringing my feet together. Okay, so let's practice that. One, two, three, tap, 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 one, two, three, tap. Okay, so now let's try that with music. Halftime, we go, and one. So the last hip variation that I'm going to share with you today is a reverse figure 8. So that looks like this. 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, or in the stationary 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap. Okay, so in our first figure 8, we started by going forward and then around to the back. In this one, I'm calling it a reverse figure 8 because it starts back to go forward, back to go forward, back to go forward. I'm also dancing this on pretty straight knees. It has a similar feeling to this one where I am not using my knees at all to create the movement in the hips. I'm just using my abdominals to create that. So a good way to practice this is just to stand with 2 straight knees, with your feet again about shoulder width apart, and you're gonna go start by turning the pelvis, then send the hip, one side of the hip back in toward the foot that you're turning your pelvis toward. Yeah, so I go back onto my right in this case, circle around forward. And now, I'm still on this foot. I transfer my weight now to the other foot and go back around forward, changing the angle of my pelvis, and then I change my weight. Back, center, forward, change the weight, the hip, this side of the hip goes back, center, forward. Very important that we don't start to just do this. This is both sides of the hips moving back, center, forward, back, center, forward. In order to create the 8, I need to focus on one side of the hip at a time, okay? So I'm gonna do it to the side. So I'm gonna turn to the right, back, around, forward. My weight's still on my right. Now I'm gonna transfer my weight and go back with this side of the hip, center, forward. Now this one, back, center, forward. Back, center, forward. Back, center, forward. And I'll do it facing away. Back, center, forward. Changing the angle. Send this side of the hip back only. And around. Now this side. Back and around. Change the angle. Back, around. Change the angle. Back, around. Back, around. Keep the knees nice and straight. Keep both feet planted on the floor. Around, back, around, back, around, back, around. Okay? So now applying this to our stationary basic, I go back, around, tap into neutral. Again, doing our settling tap. The pushing tap doesn't fit with this movement. So we go back. As I'm stepping out, I'm sending the pelvis back on the side that I'm stepping onto. And I'm also rotating my hips an 1/8 of a turn. Back, around. I'm sorry, we're doing the stationary basic. Back, around, tap. Now I'm going to rotate my pelvis as I step and bring that side of the hip around. 2, 3, tap. Back and 2 and 3 and tap. Facing away. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2 and 3, tap. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2, 3, tap. Okay? So now moving, doing our walking basic, we're going back, together. I'm always turning the hips toward the foot that I'm stepping onto and then bring the hip around. Step, tap. Now I turn my hips to the left and step on my left. 1, left side comes around, turn them to the right. Right side comes around, turn them to the left. Left side comes around and into our settling tap into neutral. Okay, we go. 1 and 2 and 3, tap. 1 and 2 and 1, 2, 3. Tap. 1, 2, 3. Tap. 1, 2, 3. Tap. 1, 2, 3. Tap. Okay, so now let's give those a shot with music. 5, 6, ready, we go. And 1, 2, 3. Tap. 1, 2, 3. Tap. Bachata challenge. I will see you back here tomorrow to learn the practice routine incorporating all of the elements that we have worked on in this challenge. I'm super excited to share it with you and to see you all dancing. So keep practicing and I will see you back here tomorrow.
Thanks so much for joining me for today's lesson. Leave a comment below and let me know how you did. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the post notifications for my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram at Dance Doctor Online. Until next time, keep dancing.